We're now recording on a camera as well, it seems. Cool. Okay, I'll clap again for you. I was born in Knoxville, Tennessee. My parents have always been huge music appreciators, even though they aren't musicians themselves. Going to school every morning, my dad would drive me and my brothers, and he would play, whatever music he had on in the car, and he would ask me and my brothers what the song meant. Even once we'd gotten to school, if I hadn't figured out what the song meant, he would stop the carpool line and wait for me to tell him what it meant before I could get out of the car, or until a teacher came by and told us I had to get out of the car. I mean, at the time I didn't even realize anyone could do music as a profession. These people seemed like grand creatures in my mind. They weren't even truly human, they were these super people, these superhumans, and in that respect I'd say it was all pretty chilling and surreal to me because it wasn't a world I'd ever really been exposed to before.
She was always singing and doing things, but in high school she got to a point where she would just get up in the morning and you'd hear the piano first thing or her singing first thing. And
I remember where it's like, oh, you can get creative with this. You don't just have to sing a certain melody and, exactly what everyone expects it to be.
I've always had a supportive family that cares about music and has pushed me to pursue music, but personally for me, I've always had a million reasons why not. When I was 8 years old, I lost all the hearing in my right ear. It was a progressive thing. I think my parents found out about my deafness around age 4 when I wasn't responding to everything they were saying. So by 8, I'd lost all the hearing in that one ear and thought nothing more of it after that. I just moved on with my life, made some funny jokes every now and then when I couldn't hear something, and that was about it.
It's a little heartbreaking to find out your kids have, some deficiency, but that was one where it was like, okay, we can manage this, she can manage this. She's only got one ear. She was profoundly deaf in her right ear, but you got one good ear. She just can't hear in stereo.
Fast forward to college, and I'm a classical vocal major at the time, just changing majors to songwriting, giving my parents a heart attack. And that first semester of songwriting, I wake up one day and can't hear anything.
She called me up and said, something's going on. I'm like, it's probably an ear infection, let's just get it checked out. And she was coming home anyway. She got here and literally I realized how severe it was. I went into that mama bear mode of, we're gonna figure it out. We're gonna figure out what's causing this and we're gonna fix it, and that's just it.
That lasted for a while. The hearing never came back. I had to readjust and learn how to acclimate and learn how to hear with this new loss. So that first semester of songwriting class was really difficult because I had to question so many things about my career and my life in that moment, whether I could do this long term, what was going to happen. It was something I decided pretty soon after losing that hearing. It wasn't really a huge question for me. I just knew, okay, I've lost this hearing, now what do I do? How do I move forward with my career? Later on down the road, when I was starting to record this record, I lost more hearing. Another grand, huge loss. Out of nowhere, wake up one day, can't hear anything. It sounds like I'm living inside a fishbowl. I can see everyone, but I have no clue what they're saying. So I halted recording and decided, under my doctor's advice, to get a hearing aid and get a cochlear implant, which means having a pretty invasive surgery. So I had that surgery and ended up having to go through the process of learning how to hear again in my right ear, the one that I lost all hearing in when I was 8, while also having to deal with my left ear that is having a temper tantrum every few weeks or months and deciding not to be able to hear anything anymore. So I took that year to learn how to hear again and write as much as I could.
So we first were just not going to accept it. We're going to beat it, right? We're going to go figure it out.
Yeah.
And so that's what we did for a while. And then finally came to a point where, so I had been praying for that miracle. And I realized that the miracle was happening because look at her. She was thriving. She wouldn't be stopped. And even though each time she would lose hearing, on paper, pitch would get better, she would get stronger, the motivation was more present, and I finally stopped running her around looking for that miracle and decided to put, the faith and the hope just back in her.
It's a tough disability to deal with because it's invisible to most people. You meet her and she tries to mask it, hide it, work around it as much as possible, but she misses a lot.
I first met Zoë at a writer's round that my husband and I and a few others were playing in Knoxville. I got introduced to her and was told that she was a great little singer-songwriter, and I just loved her instantly.
She was playing this really big round in town for a special needs organization, and we had briefly met before the show, but she didn't really know me at all. She just knew that I was this songwriter.
During the round, I called her up. Didn't tell her I was planning on this, but called her up on stage and sat down on the stage beside her, and she took my chair and my guitar and started her song. And literally a couple notes in when she was singing, I just looked at my husband like, holy wow, this is incredible.
So I take her guitar and her seat, and she's sitting on the ground there on the stage watching me play in front of the entire audience, and which was admittedly a bit nerve-wracking. So I did. I played one of my favorite songs, Rewind. It was actually the first time I'd played a show with my cochlear implant. So it was special to me in a lot of ways because I just played my first show with basically a new sense of hearing.
When she got up and she started playing, I mean, it's like I assumed that she was pretty new at it. I figured that, but then she got up there and she started playing and singing, and everything was out there. She laid it all out there, all the emotion, all the heart. I fell in love with her and her music first. It was amazing to me, and then I learned her story, and it became that much more amazing. Literally, we were inseparable. I wanted to know everything about her. She felt like my little sister, and from that moment on, I was absolutely involved. Whether she wanted me to be or not, I was involved.
After the show, we were attached to the hip and really were just so excited to work together and write songs and see what we could make of it.
She and I started pretty soon after we met, writing together, going through older songs, creating new songs, and it seemed to work well, because I come from the country world and she comes from, a different world, but the two together seemed to really work.
Before, I used to really think I had to keep my music in one lane, and that's what I did with my first record. It was more focused on the Americana sound, whereas now I realized that I can make a record that has just a vast expanse of sounds to it, and just a huge spectrum. It can go from country to pop to rock to, yodelcore. That's not on the record, but it could be just about anything I want it to be.
I was trying to explain to her how the process would go, you know, taking her in her studio, having several musicians being in there at the same time, tracking the songs, and, you know, trying to explain to her what it would be like.
I'd never really recorded a record like this before, where you actually have a group of musicians come into a room and play off each other. And I'd never experienced that before, so it was a lot of fun just seeing the inner workings of my song in someone else's head. My approach in the studio has never been to create something too perfect. I really love things that are just a little imperfect, a little left of center, just enough to make you think about the song in a way that really relates, hopefully, to your life and your experiences. And I think when something is just too pristine, sometimes that takes away from what you could be getting out of a song. It really captures the essence of life itself in when you have those imperfections, because that is what life is. We have our high moments and our low moments, our good and our bad. Honestly, I loved every perfect, ugly, and beautiful moment of these songs.